Hello everyone, I'm Janet Salmons. I'm happy to join you from across the pond in Boulder, Colorado. I've been a member of the New Social Media, New Social Science Network, and I'd like to share with you some of the ideas and questions that have emerged around research ethics. First, a personal anecdote. When working on online interviews in real time, I decided to dedicate an entire chapter to online research ethics. But when the peer reviews came back, reviewers felt that even that was not enough and that it would be important to include ethics tips in every chapter of the book because ethical concerns are present at every stage of the research process. This experience came to mind when reflecting on the activities of the network this year because it seemed that whatever the topic of conversation, issues around ethics seem to surface. So to learn more about the thoughts, ideas, and concerns of the network around these issues, we crafted a questionnaire, and I'll share a little bit about those findings here today. In addition, I've imported the blog and other posts and tweet chats into NVivo using NCapture in order to see what other points may have emerged in conversations during this year of the project. Using all of those questions, we'll then take a look at existing ethical guidelines and the numerous resources that were suggested by the people who responded to the questionnaire. In addition, we'll take a look at some of the current books that have come out in the last year or so on research ethics to see if they shed any light on the questions that we've been discussing. All of that will fold into a report that we'll post on the blog, so stay tuned. In the meantime, let's look at what we learned in this questionnaire. 67 very thoughtful people contributed, and as you can see from this chart, the largest group were doctoral researchers. We also have down here in red graduate students. In addition, there are a number of participants from faculty researcher positions or research methods, lecturers, editors, and others working in this field. So the first question, how do you make decisions about research ethics? The top response was that I look at the guidelines established by my discipline or field. Over here in purple, I look to the guidelines established by my institution. But here in the middle, very prominent position, we have the response that I use my own instincts, my own values. I determine for myself what I think is right. The kinds of resources suggested by respondents included one report from a government agency, a number of sets of guidelines from professional associations, some from business groups, especially market research materials, and another set of books and articles. And again, a complete reference list and links to these materials will be included in the report that will be posted on the blog. The top issues fall broadly into these 6 categories. There were a number of comments about privacy and anonymity of participants, about sampling and recruiting, including a concern that we not exclude people who are either not online at all or are not active online in social media. Questions about informed consent, how, when, and then once we are conducting the study, questions about our own roles and presence and identity as researchers. And in qualitative studies, how we develop rapport and relationships with participants for interviews or observations and that type of study. How do we use what is acceptable to use in terms of user-generated content and videos and photos? Then once we've collected the data, who owns it? And how do we make sure it's secure? When asked whether the guidelines they use are up to date and adequate, we had a fairly even split. Yes, no, and not sure. In response to the open-ended questions, we received a number of comments. This first one, we are left to our own devices, to me points back to that strong response about turning to one's own instincts and values and sense of what is right when making the decisions, because the materials are simply either not adequate or we get conflicting advice, and that causes confusion. A number of points around either this one, the IRB still seems to be afraid of the internet. Those who are reviewing my research are simply not up to speed about what social media entails, what this kind of research involves. And then again, the technology is moving so fast that by the time resources are developed, they're already out of date. I won't read through all of these comments, but you can see that they range from very practical to fairly philosophical points. When asked to prioritize what of these kinds of issues are most important and need immediate attention by the field, it seemed apparently difficult to come up with a top kind of one or two that take precedence across the entire list. They all seem important. In fact, a number of people just made the comment, I think they would all benefit from attention and clarity. So now that we can see, many people feel that some additional resources are important. What kind of form should they take? And the top response here was a website or blog where I can find updated e-research ethics materials. And this, to me, points to the issue of kind of rapidly outdated materials. So, perhaps with a website of this kind, materials could be updated on a regular basis, and that might be a better way to go about it. Then a set of clear guidelines that my institution can adapt. Let's face it, many institutions or even professional societies lack the resources to spend the time needed to look into these very complex issues and come up with some kind of guidelines that would make sense. So having something that could be adapted and put into place would be helpful. And then a number of comments around the need for different kinds of training for people in various positions, including both from the faculty side and the researcher side, and then the student side of the question. So other issues and ideas that surfaced in the answers to the open-ended questions in the questionnaire. Ethics issues for each form of social media must be considered separately as well as holistically. The way we interact, whether it's visual, oral, or written in different social media platforms, the fact that these platforms are in fact not neutral, and really dictate the ways that someone might participate, and are run very differently and have different rules for researchers, means that we can't have a kind of one-size-fits-all response. There's a comment that we need to keep in mind sort of the big picture beyond research of kind of the whole movement of, towards online engagement, and, what that means, and how that influences the decisions that we make. In thinking about training, the quote-unquote holistic seminars offered to people from across disciplines. There needs to be some kind of standardization. So I interpret this in a way, you're thinking about the fact that one characteristic of online research is that it crosses geographic and national boundaries. So, we may find that, we're hampered by the fact that there are different sets of rules and regulations in different countries. And so perhaps this response is pointing to the need for at least some kinds of universal guidelines that might be, helpful to those of us who are crossing those boundaries. And then, since we are crossing boundaries, we need cultural competencies and flexibility and understanding of the multicultural participants and in social media and participants in our studies. And then this final one on this page, encouragement to researchers to publish their research methods. So in other words, to communicate how they went about conducting the study, spend a little bit more time on that, so we can understand what choices were made and why. So then, looking at the tweet chat, some of the themes that emerged there, this issue about public versus private, which has many different implications and different implications for qualitative and quantitative researchers, is one that really surfaced seemingly, throughout every conversation. And then, stemming from that, the question, well, if we aren't sure what is public and what is private, what is the responsibility of the researcher? And then, as a related point, what are the perceptions of users? What do they expect when they contribute to a social media community? Do they see that as a public place or as a private place? And how do they expect what they have written to be used or understood by others? Related point, again, informed consent, when, how, and also getting back again to the role of the researcher. Is it acceptable to collect data without identifying oneself as a researcher, or when do we need to disclose that we are conducting research in a social media community? Again, that existing texts and guidance and instruction are simply, not adequate. And coming off of that, the need not only to think about new guidelines, but about new thinking altogether, in a more comprehensive way about research and ethics, and about new literacies for researchers. So a few observations so far in this work in progress. One is that, at least in this network, we took the message of blurring the boundaries fairly seriously, and the idea that we work going forward in a multidisciplinary, multi-method kind of way, and really bridging the qualitative and quantitative and other kinds of disciplinary as well as national boundaries, would be important. the need for ongoing development. So, this is not a question where, we can figure this out and voila, problem solved. No, this is a issue that will need ongoing attention and continual updating and revision because things are just changing so quickly. The need to engage those who teach, review, and edit. We could see from the response to this questionnaire, as well as the participation in many of the events that I looked at in the blog and the tweet chat. So we've had a lot of participation by graduate students and doctoral researchers. How do we bring in those who are more established in their fields, the experienced researchers who are guiding others, and those who edit journals or perhaps make decisions about funding so that they understand what this kind of research is all about and how to evaluate the quality of these research designs and these completed studies. The need to engage and encourage scholars to explain and discuss not only what they found, but how they did it. So, rather than kind of skate over the methods and methodology section and or to, give a brief description, to really go into more depth about how and why, rationale for the decisions that they made, because clearly, this is a time where we need the opportunity to learn from one another. So um, the encouragement for scholars to be more explicit in the articles and the books that they write, but also, the need for, some kind of forum for this exchange, as indicated by the high response on the question about using a website or a blog, as a way for exchanging ideas around these issues. So now what? Continue with the review of the guidelines and all of the materials that were suggested by people who participated in the questionnaire and in the tweet chats. So I want to go back and take a closer look at those and some of the other materials mentioned earlier. Get those materials out to the network through the blog so that people can use them and continue to evaluate them, and to think about what kinds of resources and training, etc., are needed and will be beneficial to everyone in the field and really allow for kind of further development in this area of social media and online research. So I look forward to hearing more about your thoughts as we continue to think through all of these ideas and questions. And thanks for allowing me to share this with you. Have a great event. Talk with you soon.